Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here today. My name is Dr. Austin Tiffany. I'm joined here by two guests and experts in very different ways on the topic. I'll introduce them properly in just a moment, but I want to begin with two quotes. His Eminence Sheikh Abdullah bin Bayyah is expected to give remarks in Hiroshima next week on the topic of AI ethics. From a recent draft of his speech, he's expected to say the following. Artificial intelligence may pose a threat to life as an uncontrolled weapon against humanity. Religions in general, and Islam in particular, have given ethics and virtues a high status and position and are keen to ensure technological innovations preserve the dignity and nobility of man. Concerned religious leaders, technology companies, government actors, and others must, therefore, cooperate to maximize the benefits of these technologies and reduce their risks by ensuring the development of artificial intelligence complies with high and strict ethical standards. Now, on the other side of the world and closer to home, just last month, we heard Pope Francis address the G7, the first time a pontiff has ever done so. He used this unprecedented address to talk about AI, saying, and I quote, "At a time when artificial intelligence programs are examining human beings and their actions, it is precisely the ethos concerning and understanding the value and dignity of the human person that is most at risk in the implementation and development of these systems. Indeed, we must remember that no innovation is neutral. Technology is born for a purpose and, in its impact on society, always represents a form of order in social relations and an arrangement of power." These two quotes are from two senior religious leaders from different traditions, from different parts of the world, speaking on the opportunities and risks of artificial intelligence. It's actually wisdom from these two leaders that compelled us as the Forum for Peace UK, of which I have the privilege of helping direct, to hold an event last summer in Parliament on AI, faith, and the future of society, which Nathan and Zeshan were both there. The discussion was really rich, but it was just a starting point. And we're really pleased that that discussion is continuing now with everyone in this room. So to help capture the thinking from that discussion last summer, our team, along with our partners at the Faraday Institute for the Study of Science and Religion at the University of Cambridge, produced a handbook that my colleague Nicole, who in many ways was the brain behind the structure and how to frame this handbook, will now walk you through. So Nicole, over to you.
Thanks, Austin. I'm really excited to be here to talk you through the AI Faith and Ethics Handbook. As Austin explained, this came out of an event in Parliament just over a year ago now. To be honest, we didn't go into that conference with the mindset that we were going to set out to make a handbook out of it. Our goal at the time was just to bring together different perspectives to discuss some of the most fundamental questions surrounding AI and faith, like what are the key human values that should shape AI? And we thought it was an especially important conversation to have, given conversations about AI ethics are often limited to a very small group of people who are nearly always not representative of the different belief systems that make up our society, including faith perspectives. So with that in mind, the conference brought together guests from different faith perspectives and professional backgrounds. We had some legislators, so former member of parliament like John Cruddas, Sajid Javid. We had a member of the House of Lords, Lord Way, who spoke from a policy perspective. And then we also had some academics, like Father Paolo Benanti, who is the Pope's advisor on AI, Dr. Jacob Chowdhury, Dr. Raymond Harvey, and Dr. Nathan Mladin, who we're going to hear from in a moment. We had specialists who were kind of interested in the nuts and bolts of how AI is developed. And then on the other hand, we had people who were more interested in the questions AI poses for humanity, including perhaps the most fundamental question of all, which is, what does it actually mean to be human? Really looking back, the only thing our speakers actually had in common was faith. And even within common belief systems, we saw a huge range of views. Some were incredibly optimistic about AI, particularly about its potential in the health sector. And then others were extremely negative about AI and were concerned with its potential to amplify biases or to spread misinformation. And I remember saying to Austin in a few weeks before the conference that I was really panicked that we would find it hard to facilitate a conversation with such a broad range of people. I remember saying, if we've got one person who's got a really good technical understanding of AI and who works with AI in their day-to-day life, and someone else who's very new to the topic, how can we actually have a meaningful conversation? I can't remember exactly what Austin said, probably something along the lines of stop panicking, go for a walk and get a coffee, which is always good advice. But what I do remember that he was right about was not to worry, because in reality, it did work. And what we learned from that experience was actually you don't need to have a specialist understanding of AI to start engaging with AI ethics. Once you get over some of the basic questions about AI, in reality, everyone has something that they can contribute. You don't need to be an expert in the workings of large language models to be able to start thinking about how AI might impact truth. You don't need to be a specialist in neural networks to realize the importance of accountability in AI development. You don't need to be Sam Altman to know that technology needs to be shaped by our values rather than the other way around. The other key reflection we took was that although we had a good mix of people in the room, faith perspectives still remain underrepresented. So it was with those 2 points in mind that we got the idea of making a handbook. The idea was to use the rich discussions in the conference to answer some of these big, daunting questions about AI in a way that someone who doesn't come from a technical background like myself can understand, learn from, and feel empowered to contribute to. So that's how the entire handbook is structured. It's structured around some of these big, daunting questions on AI. Questions like we have on the screen: what is AI ethics? Why faith? Is AI a good or a bad thing? It grapples with topics ranging from fake news to bias, to the use of AI in the medical sector, and some of the big challenges in developing AI ethics, particularly around how we implement human values into the way it's developed. Obviously, the answers in this handbook are just one perspective to the answers of some of these questions, not the perspective. I think we'd all struggle in this room to agree on, for example, whether overall AI is a net good or a bad thing. But the idea is to encourage readers to feel like they have enough of a starting point to contribute to this really important discussion. If there was one thing I would want you to take from this session and from the handbook, it's that you don't have to be a specialist in AI to talk about these crucial questions and to speak out about the part you think AI should play in our lives. Because your voices are as important as any voice in Silicon Valley. And if this handbook contributes in a small part in helping people to feel more confident in broaching these subjects and asking important questions about how the technology works and how it should work, then I would consider it to have achieved its goals. As I said, at the end of the day, human values should shape AI rather than AI shaping human values. And human values are shaped not by machines, but by people. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Austin, Nathan, and Zishan for a panel discussion. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Nicole. There's a limited number of copies of the handbook available when you leave. If you're not able to get a physical copy, we also have QR codes where you can download it for free. So do take one on your way out. Allow me now to introduce our panelists. So first, on my left, we have Dr. Nathan Mladin, is a senior researcher at Theos, a think tank committed to exploring the place of religion in society through research, commentary, and events. Nathan holds a PhD of systematic theology from Queen's University, Belfast, and is the author of several publications, many of which are relevant to our discussion today, including the Theos reports AI in the Afterlife, From Digital Mourning to Mind Uploading, Data Dignity, Why Privacy Matters in the Digital Age, and Nathan's written a chapter exploring the ethical implications of surveillance capitalism in the book, The Robot Will See You Now. Nathan, it's great to have you with us. And to Nathan's left is Zeshan Zafar. He's the executive director of the Abu Dhabi Forum for Peace, drawing on decades of experience at the intersection of faith, society, and politics. Zeshan unites a diverse range of individuals to foster dialogue and collaboration. Welsh-born, he advocates for and speaks about the British Muslim community around the world, and he spearheads international initiatives that convene faith leaders, politicians, and civil societies. And he also critically serves as a commissioner for the AI Faith and Civil Society Commission, which I'm sure he'll talk about in a bit. Before we dive into the discussion, we have something for you to do. So if you have phones on you, please get your phones out. There are some QR codes on the rows on little sheets of paper, or you can scan this one right here. What that will do is take you to a poll. we've held events since last summer, both in Westminster in December and then in Abu Dhabi earlier this year, where we asked participants a couple of questions. And just to get the conversation going, we want to ask some of these questions to you now. So again, if you have trouble scanning that, there are some QR codes on little sheets of paper on your rows. So the first question that we're going to ask, and once you log on, you're going to be able to answer this, is which best describes your views on AI? Are you an optimist with short-term impact, an optimist with long-term impact about AI, a pessimist with short-term impact or long-term impact? And as you'll see, we're going to see things live. Zeshan, we did this poll in Abu Dhabi, and I think one of the things that really struck us was how optimistic people were. Over 80% of people were optimists about AI. Are you expecting something similar today? It's reflecting it at the moment, but what are your thoughts?
I wasn't, to be honest. I know, we had 80% in the UAE, but I think it's a sort of place where, innovation and technology is really encouraged. But I'm really impressed by this because I did feel there was, especially from the community, and I can see a lot of Muslims here, that they would be very conservative about such issues. We as a Muslim community haven't done, industrialization, digitization, technological advancement so well. So my concern was that we would perhaps be very hesitant about how and what our viewpoints are, but I'm keen to engage the audience as time goes on, but to hear more about their viewpoints.
Yeah, that's great. And that's also a good plug to say that also on this app, you'll have the opportunity to ask questions. So if you come up with a really good question on top of your mind that you don't want to wait till the end Q&A to jot down, you can actually put it in the app and I'll get it on my phone so we can get to that at the end. So as questions do pop up, do add them in. But we will also have traditional Q&A at the end. So we're going to move on. So just to look at this, it is very interesting. I mean, I think it's not as optimistic, Zeshan, as the audience in Abu Dhabi. And although we didn't ask this question explicitly when we were in London in December, the overall mood was much more pessimistic than we have here. So I guess that's the joy of being in the north, perhaps. Great, so we're going to move on to the next one. This is the result that we had in Abu Dhabi, actually. So as you can see, very optimistic. The next question is, which three values are most important to consider in the discussion around AI ethics? So again, we'll give you a moment to answer that. And I want to give this question to Nathan. Nathan, I mean, we did ask this question in London in December. How would you answer today?
Are you asking me to predict?
No, just for you.
Yeah. What are the three values? For me, I would probably go with truth, which subsumes transparency and accountability and justice. Because again, accessibility, I think, is an aspect of justice. So therefore, truth and justice would be my two main ones. And I realize that's not three, but I'm trying to make the argument that the rest can be subsumed under those two.
Yeah, very interesting. And I think what's actually very fascinating, and we'll see the results from our previous two events in just a moment. Accountability has never cracked the top four in our previous two events, but here it's leading, which is very interesting. Justice was the top in Abu Dhabi, and truth was the top in London, as you can see there. Great, thank you all. I think what's really helpful for us is we obviously, there's not very many controls in this survey, but it's interesting to capture how people feel about the topic. And so it's really insightful for us as we continue this work and carry on our conversations. So now I want to move to questions. So we've just kind of gauged the audience a bit about their feelings on AI, and we'll hear more about them. But let's kind of go back to basics. Let's go back to a starting point. And so the first question is, Nathan, it'd be helpful to know, what do we actually mean by artificial intelligence, and specifically AI ethics? Are there practical examples that you might be able to give about ethical considerations that come into play when discussing AI?
Yeah. Well, rather frustratingly, there isn't one universal definition of AI. There's lots of disagreement. I think one thing to bear in mind when we think about AI is that it's not one thing. It's a general purpose technology, but in fact it's a suite of technologies. It's a suite of systems that are capable of doing various tasks that previously only human intelligence was capable of. So it's executing things that for a lot of the time we assumed were the purview of humans. That's what they did, and they did only. So it's a suite of technologies, but I guess more recently everyone's talking about a particular class of AI, which is generative AI. And again, the kind of the iconic image of generative AI is ChatGPT, and this is a particular kind of AI that can produce text and images and even video. So systems that execute tasks that humans would have done previously. And it's said to be a technology that is as consequential as the internet, possibly as consequential as electricity, even as consequential as agriculture. But this is an ongoing debate. We don't know yet. We are in many ways just at the beginning of this AI revolution. And because it's such a powerful technology that touches on so many aspects of our individual and social lives, the question of how do we develop and how do we deploy and integrate this technology in our lives is hugely salient. And this is where the whole ethics conversation comes in. And ethics obviously is more than just right and wrong, minimizing harms and maximizing benefits. That's often what kind of transpires in conversation about ethics, but really it's about a sustained reflection on what are the ingredients, what are the conditions, what are the challenges to a good life, both individually and a healthy and a just society. So AI ethics is really kind of the application of ethical thinking, serious thinking about these sorts of questions to the development and use of AI in our world. You asked for some examples, Austin. I'm going to go for the slightly less obvious ones. The more obvious ones that a lot of people are talking about are around bias and biased data sets and biased algorithms and kind of the unfairness that results from using such kind of biased data sets. But I'm going to pick a different example. AI in education. Because with ChatGPT, with these large language models, now students have unrestricted access to these very powerful systems that can generate their exam essays, that can deliver personalized educational content. So this raises huge questions about what is education? What is the purpose of education? Is it just a transfer of information, or is it more than that? Is it about wisdom? Is it about formation, about virtue and character? So these are all kind of ethical questions that needs to be brought into the conversation, not just roll out the technology, put the chatbots in the classroom and say, we've automated education, right? This is where AI ethics wants to say, hold on a minute, what are the goods at stake here? What do we gain and what do we lose? What are the unintended consequences? And all of these kind of serious questions that we need to ask. Another example that actually I picked up just today, coming up here and flicking through the Financial Times, is an AI system that can in real time change the emotional tone of someone's voice. So for example, in Japan, SoftBank is financing a system that can be used by call centers, by various companies and in their customer support function to screen out basically negative emotions coming from angry, mean customers that are complaining. Now, you might think, well, that's great because it protects the employees of the call centers or of the company. But wait a minute. Who owns the voice of the person who's calling? Can you just do that? Can you just remove negative emotions? Who decides what is a negative emotion? And what are the long-term effects of that? So these are just two examples where clearly we need to be thinking about the ethical aspects of using these powerful systems.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Thank you, Nathan. Earlier today, there was a talk that Sheikh Hamza gave just across the road, and he gave this example of science professors giving AI thesis questions, this thing about going back to education. And within 30 seconds, it came out with a thesis that would pass the standards within the university as a thesis and would award a doctorate. So it's really interesting. The implications for education are huge. I mean, also interesting because Sheikh Hamza spoke quite extensively a bit on AI on a topic or in a session that wasn't necessarily about AI. And he obviously is a great Islamic scholar. And in the handbook, we have excerpts from other Muslim, but also Jewish, Christian, or Protestant, and Catholic background, their voices, policymakers of faith and no faith, as Nicole described. And Zeshan, this question I want to bring to you first. Where does faith even fit in this discussion? We had quotes from Sheikh bin Baya and Pope Francis, but what do they actually contribute to the discussion that we're having as a wider society today?
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. So thank you, Austin. Such an important question today because, as you know, and everyone else that works within AI, where you do carry your faith with you, this question crops up, and it feels like it's a long journey, and it's a journey that's going to be trodden, for some time. But overall, faith has a huge importance, I think, when it comes to intersecting and engaging with AI, because we have to consider a lot of the existential challenges that we're going to face for mankind today. We know that technology brings a lot of disruption as well as goodness. It allows us to flourish in many, many ways, and we've seen that through scientific development. But those challenges and harms are also extremely concerning. We're already reading about the marginalization of vulnerable communities around the world. We are asking ourselves, everyone's asking ourselves, the question of, what does work look like in 5 to 10 years' time? Will I have a job in 5 years' time? What will my children do? Do I need to retrain them? Do I need to put them onto a different track? So these are the things that are really concerning, and they are concerning for all of mankind, I'm sure. But faith has a duty. And we have to face up and engage with the tech world in an appropriate manner, where we are able to bring up our concerns, but also be able to offer something, especially in the realms of how to build a more ethical aspect of AI through algo ethics or virtues. So I mean, one of the concerns we have, and this is something that we've discussed amongst the commissioners many times, is the concern about the effects of the fact that a lot of the technology is being made in the West and America, but what about the effects? Has it taken into consideration of the effects of people living around in the global South or people in Asia? Cultures and virtues are very different as well at times. We have now question marks about how tech companies are using labor from Africa, a very poor rate of something like $2 or $3 a day to do their work of data marking. So this disparity in pay, where tech companies are developing this wonderful technology, it's bringing in billions of pounds. How do you justify that and correlate that to, or square it with the fact that you are employing people around the world on a minimal wage? So faith must think about, okay, how do we stand up? We've seen some really good examples. We know, Austin and I worked on a document actually called Faith in Action for the World Economic Forum. And one of the key statistics that we put out near the front was that the 85% of the world follows a faith or a belief today. So that's pretty important. It's impacting, the effects of AI is going to impact on a lot of people. And a lot of people, it may well impinge on the rights of their faith, or the sensitivities of their faiths and beliefs and so on. So how do we take this into consideration? So from my perspective, and these are the discussions that I'm hearing in the circles of faith who are engaging with AI, is that we need to respond to this. And one of the ways we respond to this is through our scriptures that have always tended to empower us and promote that well-being and guidance. Nathan referred to the good life, and that's what it is. How do we get that good life, that joy, that happiness within societies again, as well as being flourishing that protects all these innocent people? So these are important things. From a faith dimension, in Islam, we have these universal principles about protecting life, property, reason, intellect, human dignity, and faith. So how do we expand these discussions? I would say at the moment, it's something that we're a long way away from, but I'm also optimistic, and that's why even when we did these surveys, I've always been quite enthusiastic about what the opportunity is, considering the fact that we need to ensure that faith leaders are able to engage with tech companies. What we don't want is tech companies to switch off from us. Already we're seeing tech companies switching off from policymakers. They don't like their work being marked by policymakers. So how do we ensure that we are a part of that discussion? How do we demonstrate to tech companies that faith is not seen as a hindrance, but also they take into our consideration about harnessing the fear of abuse and misuse? So the key thing for faith is that we need to think about how we can work with tech companies, how we can develop the discussion around algorithms, especially algorethics, which is coined by a friend of ours, Professor Paolo Benanti, who's at the Vatican at the Gregorian University. So how do we inculcate the algorithms to do good things? Inculcate virtues, truth, honesty, kindness. What we don't want to see is a replication of what's happened with social media and where we are today with it, and maybe we'll go into it later on. So I would say there's three main things. How does faith fit in? We know that the OECD framework looks at inclusion. We need to ensure that faith is a voice. At the moment, it's not. We need to be part of that whole process. We need to demonstrate that faith has grappled with these existential questions for centuries. So what can we provide? If you look at the debate around ethics, a lot of virtue ethics was developed by many of the especially the Abrahamic traditions. These are corpuses of works that have been done on this to challenge and develop AI companies to understand that we have a very important pivotal role. And the last thing is that faith offers a very unique perspective, a very different perspective. Faith groups have always been critical in preserving the cultural beliefs and their beliefs so they don't erode in any given society. And we must be really mindful that, and I'm going to be quite open about this, being back in Britain, but Western secular ideological thinking really emphasizes on individual entity. But in the global South and in the East, it doesn't work like that. Communities, the sense of community, Sheikh Hamza alluded to it in the morning, the sense of families are really, really important. And they were important in Western societies as well. But what we've seen in the last 20 to 30 years is that degradation and the importance of the nuclear family. So how can we reestablish that? And how do we bring virtues back into the discussion and the system?
Great. Thank you, Zeshan. And I want to ask a similar question to Nathan. And Nathan, you are a practicing Christian as well. And so from your own faith background, Zeshan touched on his Muslim background. What does Christianity say about AI ethics and the values that we should be at the forefront of our minds?
Yeah, just slightly to pull back a little bit and just say, I think faith more generally, and obviously I'm speaking as a Christian, expands the framework and horizon in which we need to be thinking about everything really, including AI systems, because a faith perspective speaks out of and to the profound intuition that there is more to a human being than what can be measured and taken apart, that life is more than just survival, competition, or consumption, or any other kind of goals set by the market. That life is imbued with ineradicable meaning, we would say even transcendent, sacred meaning. I think uniquely, faiths, and I speak as a Christian here, gives us, and I'm going to use two bigger words here and I'm going to explain, gives us an ethics which is underpinned by an anthropology and geared towards an eschatology. Now, those are big words. What do I mean? What we should do, right, the ethics part, how we should build, how we should deploy, depends on what we understand the human person to be. That's the anthropology. A conception of what it means to be human and to flourish as one. And then the eschatology has to do with kind of the end goal, the direction in which we're headed as the world. What kind of a society, what kind of a world do we want to to bring into being. So this is what Christianity offers to us more specifically. Well, for example, to speak to the anthropology question, it tells us that we are more than just complex biological and thinking machines. We are not machines in the first place. We are persons in relationship. I like how a Christian author called Andy Crouch describes the human being as a mind, body, soul complex made for love. So to be a person is to be in relationship with the natural world, with each other, and with God. It also reminds us that personhood is bigger, greater, more important than intelligence. And it pushes back on narrow definitions of what intelligence is. Oftentimes we just take it for granted, artificial intelligence, but wait a second, what about emotional intelligence? What about social intelligence? All of these things can be screened out, can be left out if the faith perspective is left out, if a wider, more robust, truer conception of what it means to be human is on the table. Another thing that kind of Christianity contributes is this emphasis on, this has been mentioned already, the intrinsic, inalienable dignity of every human being. There aren't classes of human beings when we're thinking normatively. And also, the importance of the body. We have technologies that are, in a sense, developed as if we weren't embodied creatures, but we are. We are embodied creatures. And our bodies are really the way we present ourselves to the world. A body is the tangible presence of a human being. It's not a meat bag. It's not bad technology that we need to upgrade. It's something sacred. It's the seat of our emotions and personality. And there are many other aspects, bias towards the poor and the vulnerable, and this is not unique to Christianity, but I think, again, the faith groups can uniquely issue this call. Do not leave behind the ones who are already kind of excluded because of other systems of exploitation and injustice. And we need to bring them and ensure that flourishing is shared and prosperity is shared. And the gains, which are touted and talked about of the AI revolution, are shared widely across all the various divides that we have in our world.
Thanks, Nathan. Zeshan, you were also just speaking then about what faith engagement has been like so far. But what opportunities do you see for further inclusion of faith perspectives? Because what we've just witnessed is, and over the last 20 minutes or so, is that faith groups do have something, or faith traditions do have something quite productive to add to the discussion. But is anyone listening? What opportunities do you see, Zeshan, for the greater inclusion of faith voices?
Yeah, it's a very good question. I liked what Nathan just said about flourishing, that we ensure that all of our societies flourish. Sheikh Hamza was saying it before. Now, he said it in one of his lectures in the past, that, and I've witnessed it as well, being with him in Morocco, that one of the things about society is that we always think about the other, and the other is you as well. And we don't want to otherize other people for the harm that it may cause to our society. And Morocco is a really good example. When you go out shopping in the Medinas, in places like Rabat, Casablanca, and so on, you'll sometimes go to people, and this consistently happens, and you'll go to buy perhaps Moroccan ghab or shoes, and the gentleman will say to you, go to the guy 3 shops down, he's not had any business today. So it's this, duty of care and love, and these are all values that exist, as Nathan rightly pointed out, in all of our faiths. But I think there's certain things that are the commonality of what our faiths are trying to do and explore. There's a lot of similarity, and that's why we've seen a real, a nice coalescence of unity coming in over AI at the moment. If you look at the work that's being done around the world, and remember, it only started really. I mean, we saw a few projects happening before with those guys from AI and Faith who've got this wonderful website and so on, but no one was actually going out engaging with tech companies and so on. And I'm seeing some promise in the last 18 months, not just because of my organization, The fact that we've now started an AI Faith and Civil Society Commission, we've had the potential to travel the world, get insights, get the opinions of people from the Global South, those that are marginalized, people who are going through, challenging social, economic, and development times. And it's going to be really critical for us to be able to address that to tech companies. But I am hopeful. And the reason why I say that is that it's, religionists tend to be at the bottom of the rung when it comes to critical debate. Like, there's so many things ahead of it, like technology, engineering, science, and so on. And it doesn't really get a favorable account. But I think people are starting to realize faith does play an important role. I was involved in a project with Bill Gates around about 12 years ago, and the whole issue was around how does he eliminate polio, because it's one of the easiest diseases to eliminate in our society. And there were a few challenges that they had, that in Nigeria and Afghanistan and places like Pakistan, there was this resistance to polio vaccination. Some of it was through fear, conspiracies. There was, some of it rightfully so, because there were sterilization programs that were carried out in the past in some of these regions. So one of the ways that they actually galvanized the communities or increased the uptake of polio was that they got the religious leaders to go out to their communities and engage with them, that people have trust amongst their faith leaders. And so overall, I think I'm very hopeful. It's only been 18 months. I think it's been around about 18 months since we had our last event, and I've got an event next week in Japan. And I think the tech companies are starting to listen. They really are starting to listen. We've got Brad Smith, the president of Microsoft, Vice President Dario Gil from IBM, and these are people who are committed to their own faith, but they need to hear from those specialists out there, those ethicists who can develop these frameworks, and that's where we're heading at this moment in time. So I'm pretty optimistic that if we can draw the common thread between policymakers, government, tech world, and faith and civil society, it may sound a bit utopian at the moment, but I think it's something that's really realistic, and we've just got to carry on managing that relationship with the tech world, but also being very truthful and honest, and we want them to be transparent as well, and that's why these virtues have been at the forefront. These are all critical virtues that should be at the heart of all of these, at the heart of this debate around AI and ethics.
Thanks, Zeshan. And Nathan, I think Zeshan was talking about, getting all these different voices as part of people are starting to recognize. I mean, Theos is a think tank a couple of blocks from the Houses of Parliament. And by its very nature, Theos is engaging with people from all throughout society and trying to distill things into a way that makes sense to policymakers whenever Parliament isn't dissolved. But looking ahead, what are some of the challenges that you see in your position around the development of AI ethics? And how do you think that faiths can inform any responses to those?
Well, and this is not unique to AI, but we see kind of the dominance of utilitarian kind of thinking over other important values and other ways of approaching the question of ethics. And we also have a technocratic politics that doesn't really pause to ask these bigger questions about the goods that we want to safeguard, protect, and promote. What the faith perspective brings is it highlights the fact that technology is not neutral, as we've heard already. It's neither good nor bad, nor is it neutral. It's laden with assumptions and about human nature, about flourishing, about what a good society looks like, and it has power over us, over our virtues, over our habits, over our beliefs, over our life in common, and it therefore needs to be scrutinized at this level, at the level of how it's designed, how it's developed, and how it's used. And I think people of faith, as we've talked already, can speak at these different levels, at the level of how these systems are developed, and we shouldn't overlook the fact that there are people of faith working in the technology sector who can bring their faith and their moral outlook in their work, in the way they say, let's not do this, let's not introduce this feature because it'll have this effect, and this will come out of their deeper assumptions about the person, about the good life. So this is, people of faith are engineers, are tech executives, and we shouldn't lose hope that they are speaking the truth out there. Obviously, we can intervene in calling for regulation of these systems, and again, promoting those kinds of goods that are coming out of a faith perspective is so important. I think AI is giving us a unique opportunity to articulate the way what we believe most deeply about the world shapes what and how we build and deploy the world. And I think AI uniquely opens up this possibility because it spotlights the human being and raises these profound questions about what is reality anyway? What does it mean to be a human being anyway? Because the answer to these questions has consequences in the real world because of the way AI systems are deployed. So these are all kinds of ways in which faith communities and people speaking from a faith perspective can enrich this conversation about these important human goods at stake.
Great, thank you. And now you just finished with about enriching the conversation, and I have a couple more questions, but I actually want to pivot to the audience now. So if it's possible to raise the lights, I'd like to take a couple of questions, and I've seen that there's actually a lot of questions on the app as well, which is really great. So I'll come back to a couple of those first. But if we could take perhaps 2 questions to start out. So
Hi there.
1 and then 2 there in the aisle.
It's
Maybe
quite a
you can join
broad
in that
question, I'm afraid.
Yeah.
Obviously, a lot of the discussion has been about breaking down boundaries, introducing different communities together, that kind of thing. My problem with the likes of ChatGPT, not just in questions of faith, is that it lies a lot. It tells you what it thinks you want to hear, because it just, the way that it's trained, it sort of aggregates and just tells you what it wants you to hear. So my concern would be that perhaps, obviously, we are a country, a world, a community of various different faiths. Would there not be a concern that we'd be approaching sort of homogeny rather than, the bubbling, the melting pot that we currently have? That if there's a majority opinion of Christian or Muslim or anything else, then ChatGPT or the likes would just be spitting that back out at people and creating a sort of echo chamber. I know it's in its early days and it still has more to learn, but that's, it can't teach you how to use a semicolon. So how can it teach you how to believe in your personal beliefs? Rosie, sorry. How to believe in your personal beliefs.
Great, wonderful. And what was your name?
Rosie.
Rosie, thank you, Rosie. Do you mind if we're going to take 2 questions
Thank
at
you.
a time, if that's all right? So
My
thank you,
question
Rosie,
was
and then
around
this gentleman just on the aisle.
AI development. There's currently now AI which has been created in order to create a music industry as such, so you can get artists as well. Is there an AI where it's created its own religion, or it's actually created its own faith? Is that possible? Is that out there? And just on that, what is the bigger use, or what's the use of AI? Is it there to more support, say for instance, users with functionality, or is it actually going to be there as, if you could say, almost like judge, jury in relation to ethics or even relation to politics, such as if a occurrence takes place, AI becomes part of the process or part of the decision before the act is then carried out? What was your name again? Samuel.
Great. And what was your name again? Samuel, thank you. So, two really good questions. Thank you both. Rosie, about, really about this issue of truth. And we were in Abu Dhabi. It was really interesting because one of our commissioners asked, I think it was ChatGPT, to say what the English channel was. And they only gave English responses, but actually the French have another name for it. And so which is right, which is correct? And it really confused ChatGPT, just a simple question as that. But does it tell you what it wants you to hear? Does it create this echo chamber? And from Samuel around, AI, is it possible to create its own faith? And that's a very interesting and also quite worrying proposition. Over to you both to answer either or both of those questions.
Shall I give it a crack? Okay, so in answer to Rosie's question, it's a really good question. There's a lot of debate going on at the moment around hallucinations. The misinformation that ChatGPT, for example, can roll out. And I can't really speak so much for other religions, but, being committed to my faith, I've certainly delved in and tried to work with it, and I've seen some really disturbing stuff. And I don't know how we are going to get to a point of where we can instill the systems, the LLMs and so on, to really have a good sense of understanding the variances and the subtleties. Because, even if you tackle it as a Christian, for example, how many different denominations are there, the variances and so on. So, I played around with it in terms of trying to get it to behave like someone and to write a particular Islamic ruling. And it's just typically very dry. And ChatGPT is only as good as what you drive into it, but at the same time, it's highly dependent on what sort of information and data is stored. So I'm pretty cynical of it at the moment, because I think even in the Muslim world, we haven't gone through the process of digitization as much as the Western world. So we're not having that accessibility. And I would say that it's the same for a lot of the other Eastern traditions that haven't been translated so well. So that's one challenge. And then the second thing is, these are really highly complex, sophisticated things. To give, for example, there's people going on to ChatGPT asking for Islamic fatwas, right? And this is a really complex area. So if you two ladies came to me for a question, I'm not an Islamic scholar, by the way. I'm just a practitioner at best, right? My wife calls me a fakey shaky, though. But you could be asking the same question. It may well be about marriage or a partner and so on. But an Islamic scholar of today would have completely different answers to the both of you, even if it looks like you're bringing the same thing. So he will, it's a built-up conversation. So what are the conditions? Did you do it out of anger? Did he do it out of anger? There's so many permutations that involve making rulings. So for me, I don't think ChatGPT can handle those nuances at all. And I think it's going to be a struggle. And this is where faith, Nathan alluded to that there are people who are committed to their faith, working as software developers, working and developing this whole thing, but they have limitations in how skilled they are. They're not theologians, they're not jurists. Many of them, may have, partial interest in philosophy, but what I'm hearing is that many people from the tech industries are wanting to engage with, okay, what is my priest saying? What is my theologian saying? What is my sheikh saying? What is my rabbi saying? So that they can be better informed to influence those algorithms. And the concern is that, listen, we started already having these discussions even when we were at the Vatican, was that, there's a fear that AI can spark so many other elements of war. So how do we switch the narrative and utilize AI for peace? And I think that's the most important thing. Sorry, remind me of the question from...
It was around, could we expect AI
new
to
religions
create its own faith?
I'm going to actually leave that one.
Well, I'm going to be slightly provocative and say that it's already creating its own faith, in the sense that there are plenty of people out there who are placing an excessive... Obviously, it's a particular... and it's not representative of the my faith or how you would probably engage your faith, but people placing excessive trust in systems, in computer systems, basically, and treating them as these great oracles, or even sort of worshiping them, because if you strip down worship, it's just putting all of your trust and doing what the God says to you. And if the machine, a sophisticated system, is your God, then you're going to listen to that. And we see this kind of play out in multiple kind of sectors. It's not framed as a religious act. It's not framed as worship. But whenever we give excessive trust to these systems and we don't investigate, it acts as a ruthless God that dictates what people should do. And of course, there are some fringe movements where they are working and preparing to worship a superintelligence that will emerge, which is kind of the goal of a lot of kind of technological development. I think that, speaking as a Christian, that falls under the rubric of idolatry, of actually creating a false God, of forgetting what is the order of things. But the way these systems are deployed in religious practice is a very serious question. How the training data is investigated, how those systems are fine-tuned, because hallucination is actually a flattering term. They don't actually even hallucinate. They're probabilistic systems. They just spit out what is most plausible given kind of the context range and the parameters they're given. So it also points to the fact that a lot depends on what we bring to these systems, what expectations we have of them. If you go to ChatGPT for facts, you'll be disappointed, you'll be misled. If you go for generating new ideas and for thinking outside of the box, for kind of checking something you've written, if you stay in the driving seat of the process, you can see great benefits. But if you kind of surrender to it for truth finding, for decision making, that's when we are in trouble, individually and as a society. So I think we need to just maintain responsibility for these sophisticated systems. We should wield them for the good of all. We shouldn't worship them in any way.
Great, thank you. And thank you both for great questions. We've had a lot of questions, as I mentioned, on the app, but to just pull out two of them. And the first, Nathan, I want to direct to you, because you talked about our relationship with the natural world. We're talking about kind of humanity. And we've had a couple of questions about the environment or the climate. What do we expect? Is AI going to accelerate or decelerate kind of the climate crisis that we're in? But also, how do we approach this almost triad of kind of our faith, AI, and the climate as well? How do we understand that relationship? And then to Session, I'd be keen to get your thoughts. You mentioned, I think, was it 83% of the world's religious, or somewhere around there. But obviously that means if we say it's 83%, 17% is not religious. Is that inherently exclusionary? Are we in kind of advocating for more inclusive voices, nevertheless still excluding other voices? So what is the place for secular voices in this discussion? But Nathan, would you like to go first?
Yes, I mean, I'll start by giving a bit of context, and I'm sure many of you here are aware of the great environmental footprint of these systems. All of the big tech companies who are investing billions in foundational models, in sophisticated AI systems, are building at pace data centers. And there's an environmental kind of justice question there, and also just a pure justice question, because these data centers are often in developing countries. So the relationship between those facilities and the immediate communities in which they're embedded is very significant, and we need to keep kind of these firms accountable for the way they're building. So the environmental footprint of AI is significant. The energy consumption has spiked massively in the last 5-6 years, since all of the big AI giants have been training their models. Energy consumption is predicted to continue to go up globally by at least between 2% and 6%. So people who are pointing to the environmental costs of AI development have good reasons to be worried. Not to mention the rare earth minerals that are necessary for the hardware, because we often think AI and the cloud as this something, you know, ethereal, somewhere actually in the cloud. But in fact, there are cables, there are rare minerals being mined constantly and often at unsustainable rates and in ways that are kind of not entirely equitable when you're thinking about the wider communities. So these are all live questions. I think individually we should always be asking, do I need to go to a chatbot for this task, for this query that I have, or can I just do a plain old Google search? There is a tendency, because these things can be quite magical, to just go to these systems all the time, not realizing that actually every interrogation of ChatGPT or your preferred chatbot actually has a very significant energy cost. Now, the promise, of course, is that AI will actually help us solve the energy crisis. It actually is already being deployed to achieve nuclear fusion, which would solve our energy problems. At least that is the promise. And other ways in which AI, as a very powerful pattern detecting tool, can help mitigate climate impacts. So the picture is ambivalent.
Yeah, thank you, Nathan. And I am aware of time, so Zeshan, I think if you respond to your question quite succinctly,
Yeah.
if possible.
That's easy for me to do. I mean, it's a concern for all of us. People of belief or no belief, I think a testimony to that is our AI Faith and Civil Society Commission. You know, we have people from different faith groups, people of no belief, we have humanists there. We understand that the concern is for everyone. You know, in the Quran, we have this concept called Ulu al-Baqiya, that, you know, you bring forth people of discernment. And Sheikh bin Bayer links this up with the crisis that we face. He quotes Arnold Toynbee, who studied 21 civilizations, and 19 of those 21 civilizations collapsed and fell because there wasn't a creative minority that came forth to deal with some of those contemporary issues. We're in the midst where everyone has to come together, whoever it is. It transcends religion, it transcends belief, it transcends color, race, language, and so on. You know, so I think this is a time where we come together, and I think that's what is happening at the moment as well.
Great, thank you very much. As I mentioned, if you would like to download the handbook, you can do so using that QR code. There are some copies in the back. There are also QR codes in the back that you could scan. But thank you all very much. Wish we could have more discussion. If you could join me in giving a round of applause to Nathan and Zeshan. Thank you very much. Have a good rest of your day.